Let's go.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone this evening to our Wednesday, December 16th caucus of the Albany Common Council. For the record, Mr.
I got it.
Can you please?
Sure. We have Councilmember Kelly Kimbrough, Councilmember Love, Jack Flynn, Councilmember Conti, Councilmember O'Brien, Councilmember Igo, Councilmember Hoey, Brett Williams. I'm sorry. Let me do council members first. Councilmember Frederick, Councilmember Farrell. And that's it for council members. Then we have with us as well guests from, we have Superintendent Kawita Adams and her staff. We have Paul Collins-Hackett, who has a resolution before us for the CPRB. And then from staff, we have Brett Williams, Senior Assistant Corporation Counsel, myself, Michelle Andre, and Danielle Gillespie.
If I could also add, we have Ann Savage, who's the president of the school board, yes, as well as the deputy registrar for vital statistics, who is joining us.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. So just getting into, well, the way we're going to do this is we'll go through our agenda. We'll try to get through that, and then we'll turn it over to the district folks. It's kind of what we've been doing up to this point. And we'll address we'll address Batman when we come to that resolution in the agenda. So just starting off for approval minutes from a previous meeting, it's going to be the Monday, December 7th meeting minutes. And she's not here, but I'd like to thank Councilmember Doche for some edits with regards to that.
Corrected.
They're corrected, yep, for making those adjustments. So that's December 7th meeting minutes. Moving on to local laws. Mr. Anani's not here. He mentioned something that he wanted to do, but we're moving forward. So and under local laws held, we have local law H regarding police department statistics. It passed the Public Safety Committee a couple of evenings ago with a positive recommendation. So that we'll be voting on that. That's local law H. And then following that, local law I also regarding use of police video cameras, that also passed public safety with a positive recommendation. We'll be voting on that also.
Were there amendments on one or both of these?
There was, yes, thank you very much. For the police video camera, there was an amendment that addressed turning off the camera. It added the line that we, in our report from the police chief, we'd be notified if an officer turned off his video camera more than once in the reporting period. That was the amendment for that.
So that will not be a pass. It'll be amended on Monday, but not passed.
And then it has to wait. Okay, yes, that's right. The time. There'll be an amendment. Thank you, Mr. Conti, for that. For the aging. Okay, moving on to ordinances. We'll have under ordinance introduced by Ms. Frederick, we'll have 44-122-20, an ordinance authorizing the closing of Scott Street as a part of the 76 development. That's 44-122-20. That'll be going to the Finance Committee. And along with that, the next ordinance is 45-122-20 by Ms. Frederick, also in relation to Scott Street. And it's an ordinance authorizing the sale of Scott Street to the developers over there. We're also going to put that in the Finance Committee. Well, both we're going to try to keep them together and keep them in Finance. It'll be a referral. Okay. Okay, so next, following that, ordinance introduced, we have ordinance 46-122.
Kelly,
Yes.
the one, I'm going back to 44 on the closing of Scott Street.
Mhm.
Does that require a public hearing?
It requires a public hearing and 3/4 supermajority to close down
To
Scott
pass
Street.
it.
Mhm.
Is the 3/4 majority, where is that?
Second class cities law 101.
I think the charter may have overridden that we adopted in 98, so it's just a simple majority.
I will look into that and get back. 'Cause
I'm pretty sure it
Yeah.
does.
all right.
So Mr. Pichardo, yeah, can you look into that?
But you might want to schedule the hearing sooner rather than later.
Okay, Michelle and JR, can you work on?
I typically
Getting that.
schedule the hearings, and I have a hearing for local law N coming up on January the 4th. Is it okay if I try and do the local law N and the ordinance both on January 4th? Or I think
Well-
logistically, in
Well, the
terms,
hearing on the street closing is before the council. Is the one on N is before the mayor.
yes, you're absolutely right. When would you like it? It's going to be at some point in January, probably be
So the first available,
a common council meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
the first
I'm just
available.
thinking, since we've
opportunity.
already basically rezoned the property for this project and it's currently before the planning board, I don't know if you want to hold up too long.
Right, so at your first, at the first opportunity, Ms.
So the 4th?
Gillespie. Yes, please.
Thank
Okay, next ordinance on the agenda under introductions is 46-122-20, and that's the renumbering of the USDL. And that will be a referral to planning.
Can I also ask a question on this? It is supposed to be just a renumbering and no policy, but, and I think we've expressed this in the past, that we really want each member to get hard copy because it's a rather voluminous amendment. So is that something we're asking for?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So we do have the option, because they put copy edits in there, we do have the option of not doing that, which is one of the things I potentially brought up, to just leave it alone, don't touch anything, including copy edits, and move it into E-code. And then the big issue with it is that when it's not in E-code, it's just difficult I think it's going to make things really difficult to try to juggle. So one of the things I potentially talked to the administration about was making no changes at all except for putting it in E-code. And I don't know if people would prefer that.
We've been waiting for it to go into E-code for 3 years and they haven't been able to do that for whatever reason. But if they're doing these copy edits to kind of renumber and provide consistency with the rest of the code, and then after that, submit to us the, whatever we're calling it now, the 6-month or annual review based on this renumbering.
Right.
I don't know. Should we just get this renumbering done if that is indeed what it is?
Yeah.
That is.
That's the main.
I mean,
goal.
I want to really look at it closely, but
Yeah.
get that done and then get the other thing, which hopefully will happen before I leave the council, and be able to see
Richard,
the
we all
policy
want that.
changes based on-
Yeah, and that is the
And
goal.
I think there's a plot to delay it until next year.
It is helpful to see the hard copy, and we can't do that at this point. So I would agree. I'd like to see the hard copy.
You want to request hard copies?
Yes, because then we can start looking at, it'll help us when we start looking at those amendments that are being proposed.
Okay, so we'll do that.
I'm sorry. When we're talking about hard copy, are we looking for a hard copy of the
With the new
complete
numbering.
US? What?
With the new numbering that's being
Numbers.
proposed.
All right. Well, it's more than
Of the
new
whole
numbering.
document?
There's,
Citations and so on.
yeah, I mean, there's. But so did people discuss the fact that the red line version is doesn't show all the changes? It doesn't put in red line all the changes.
You did mention that.
Yeah, in your email. Yeah. So I figured, I mean, there's definitely going to be further discussion on this. I mean, we don't have to do that right now.
Yep.
Right. I just want to lay out the preliminary.
Yes. Thank you. So, and again, that'll be going to planning. Moving on to the next ordinance, it's going to be an MC for it's extending the waiver of the bidding process for COVID-related, and it's by Miss Farrell. It's ordinance 47-122-20. It's an MC. We've done this before. This is just an extension that would waive the bidding, suspend the bidding process. We all okay with that? I mean, and this we've passed, I want to say twice or a couple times already since
Right.
COVID. So are we okay with moving it?
Is it an MC and a UC, or is it just an introduction and hold because it's an ordinance?
It's an MC and UC, right? I thought
When does it have to?
it
Oh, that's
expires.
right, because it expires on the 31st. So yeah, it's got to be
Okay.
MCUC because the time's going to run out.
Just really quick, I will be supporting this, but we have some new council members. I was wondering, can you give an example of how this could be like useful? Like it's just canceling contracts that we have so we could purchase, like not to follow.
Or what has it been used for to date?
Gotcha.
Right. So Brett, you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think Danielle might know too.
I feel like in order to purchase some of the things that we need, like the PPE materials, normally because of the total cost, you would have to go out to bid. But this allowed us to bypass the bidding process so that we could expeditiously acquire the masks, the gloves, the hand sanitizers, and the appropriate signage to put throughout the building.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
And as for what it's, I don't have any specific examples of what it's been used for, but generally that's the purpose behind the legislation as Danielle described it.
Right. Okay. And since we started, Councilmembers Fahey, Anani, and who else have joined us? Just for the record.
and Correlate and President of the Council.
Okay. All right. So that was 47 under ordinances introduced.
Hey, Kelly, on that one, is there any way we could ask the administration to get us what exactly they did order during this period? Not that we need it right away, but I'd like some kind of accounting later on so we could know exactly what did they buy and, you know, what was the cost and stuff like that. Is that something we're allowed to ask for?
I don't see why not. So again, going back to you, Michelle, can you reach out to them and see if you can get that for us? Unless Danielle has it already, which she probably does, but he's good like that. So, okay, moving on, under ordinances held, we go to number 12. It's kind of on the agenda. It's ordinance 37-102-20. Actually, I'll there's ordinance 37-102-20 regarding engineering street construction that's relating to serial bonds. That one will be up, but and then the next ordinances 38-10220 and also 39-10220. They're bonding and they're in finance right now. There's a finance meeting tomorrow evening in which these will be discussed, and pending the outcome of that meeting, we'll be voting on them at our Monday meeting. So that those are agenda items 12, 13, and 14.
Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
Can I just jump in here on the street
Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
repaving? So I'm wondering if anybody else has the same recollection that I do, that last winter, we were given some information regarding street conditions, the street report, and we got the full Capital District Transportation Committee evaluation. And then we were told that there were some errors in that, and essentially they pulled it back, and they told us that they were going to provide us with an updated one. So I asked for that, I think, a month or so ago. I reminded people that we needed that. And now again, I've asked for it. And Mr. Milano is basically saying, well, we're going to have a 2021 report. So first of all, I mean, is that people, I'm just simply asking for the most recent report, updated or not. Is the leadership willing to like insist that we get that information?
Yes, we are, and I, to my recollection, not only recall you, but I recall Michael O'Brien actually drilling and driving that point home that we needed this report. So yeah.
Yeah, and my understanding is our contract with Capital District Transportation Committee is we only get their report every other year. So how Randy Milano came up with an off-year promised report from CDTC, I have no idea. Just
in any case, I think it's been 8 months that we were 8 months ago that we were told we were going to be provided with this updated, and I got the impression we should have expected it momentarily, potentially even before we voted on the last series of street and roads repaving.
Yeah, so we'll go back at them for that.
Yeah, and probably a reasonable delay is not going to be terrible. When do they put these roads up for bidding? Not until the springtime, right?
I believe so. So we'll ask for that. Okay.
Yeah, the only issue is usually the bonding, they like to do all the bonding at once. So I think Darius might, I mean, we don't have to worry about his health because it's his health, but I think that there might be a lot of concerns just financially not having that big piece out to bid. So I think the bigger issue is less about the timing for the streets and more about the timing for the city to be fiscally responsible.
Well, I mean,
so
this
I agree. I'm happy to, it's completely ridiculous. We should not have had to wait this long for it. Yeah. I'm happy. I've had very strong words in caucus, and the administration is very aware of my unhappiness with this, and I will be sharing this with Randy tomorrow because it's completely unacceptable. However, I don't want the city to have to be in a bad situation when it comes to bonds because Randy is messing up.
Well, you know, I find it difficult to believe that they haven't been among themselves following the street situations and have a very good idea of how and why they want to spend money on which street. So, I mean, it doesn't seem to me like we're asking them to start from scratch, coming up with a justification for their street schedule.
I would agree. I would think that if one has to replace streets, it should be a regular part of your job.
Exactly.
Not a street replacement person.
Now, why and where they want to work.
But I will also share this information that the streets could be held up with the administration if we don't get the requested information. So I think that that's a fair thing to share, but I
Yeah.
do think that we should proceed carefully with that strategy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Judy. Okay, next, under ordinances held, agenda item 15, it's Mr. Hoey's ordinance 42-112-20. We'll be voting on that. That was 15. And so that's it for the ordinances. Moving on to resolutions introduced, resolution 121-122-20R is a resolution authorizing the appropriation of $5,300,000 from debt reserve to pay for bonded debt obligations. That's finance, and they'll be discussing that tomorrow evening. And depending, you want to say something? And pending the outcome of that, we'll be voting on that. Moving on to the next resolution introduced it's mine 122-122-20R. So appointing Mr. Paul Collins-Hackett to the CPRB. Mr. Hackett, excuse me, Collins-Hackett, a.k.a. Batman, is with us. Can you just introduce yourself and to the council?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being a part of this. You know, I'm from Albany, so I appreciate watching you guys like really do the work and get things done. So I appreciate that. I respect it. I'm super excited to join the CPRB, and I can't wait to work, collaboratively with everyone on this call.
Thank you, Mr. Collins-Hackett. Any members have questions, comments? Jenny?
I just wanted to thank you for being willing to serve, and I'm thrilled that we have someone of your caliber on the CPRB.
I mean, I appreciate that. I'm also telling everybody, fair warning, I'm gonna bother everybody on this call. Like you're gonna get sick of me, but I'm sure you guys knew that already. So I look forward to it, guys.
Yes. Okay, and I actually like to echo the sentiments of my colleague. I've worked with you over the years on a number of issues and boards and doing mentoring, and so I know your heart is in this, and that's what's most important when we're talking about boards like this, is that people that give of themselves, you're in it for the right reasons, and I think your presence there is only going to make the CPRB better. So thank you, congrats, and that's unless anyone else had comments, I think we're done. Okay, Mr. Anani.
Yeah, I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague Kelly and also Jenny, and just say, I think that your resume speaks for itself. The work that you do in the community speak for itself. This is an important board, and I believe that you're going to bring everything that you've learned from the experience and also from the residents to the board, and we really appreciate that. I also want to let you know that if anybody's giving you a hard time, or just in general, don't hesitate to reach out to council members, particularly if you have some good legislation, reach out to only me. But yeah, I just want to say thank you.
Got you. Absolutely. I appreciate your support. And I'll definitely be in touch. I promise you that.
Okay, thank you.
He wasn't serious.
Okay, all right. Thank you for being with us and being willing to serve. So moving on, next resolution introduced is 123-122-20R. It's a resolution by Mr. Anani. You care to speak?
Yeah, again, this is self-explanatory. This is something that, a resolution calling the administration to conduct a municipal compensation and classification study. Many of my colleagues have been pushing for this for years. And, when you look at every budget cycle, there's always staff individuals who work for the city that has some concerns as it relates to the raises that their colleagues are receiving. They have concerns as it relates to us not being competitive with other agencies, other municipalities. And I am aware that the mayor put out an RFP, but I just want to say what a perfect timing to put out RFP after this resolution went out. So I just asked for its passage on Monday.
Can I say something?
Yes.
This issue was a council initiative
That is
that
correct.
was in the council budget resolution in
That is correct.
2019
Yes.
and again in 2020. And the RFP that the mayor put out reflects what the council requested. So, I'm not sure what's what here.
Why we're doing.
We
right.
initiated this request back in 2019.
So is your point, why are we moving forward?
Passing a resolution which should have been part of our budget resolution, which was part of our budget resolution.
Yeah.
And
you know what? I asked this question.
Went out at our request.
Yeah, no, thank you for your opinion. I did ask this question a couple of weeks ago. I remember I asked it to the finance chair about this specific topic and just like the route to go about making sure that this gets accomplished. And it's interesting that on the eve of this resolution going on the agenda, there was an RFP that was put out. I get it that it was, wait, okay, let me just.
It went on.
No.
This is like a year-long thing. Do you mean the email that you sent 3 days ago to add race and gender to the RFP?
No. This one was, we've been talking about this when Dorsey was on the council. And Richard is right. We've been talking about the compensation study. We've been talking about.
It's been in the in our budget intent memo for 2 years, and it actually was Tom's idea initially.
That is correct. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I remember last finance meeting, I essentially just asked if this was the best route to go. Again, looking, I think that very too often we put a lot of information in the budget intent and it goes by the wayside. Some of that information actually.
So, I guess the thing is, but we actually have the RFP already out.
Yeah, no, it's, so would you
recommend? It was from the budget intent memo, and we've been talking about it in leadership meetings. So I think that's just it's kind of bizarre to put a resolution out.
So the question is it necessary?
Is it necessary? Yeah, that's
right now.
No, you know what? I've been going back and forth, and I spoke to JR about pulling this resolution, but it just happens too frequent. Very too often it has to be a legislation to motivate the administration to want to do something that we've been calling for. And I get it, Jenny, that we put this in the budget intent in 2018. We've been advocating for it since 2019. And I just feel like, very too often, sometimes it has to be through legislation to see the administration act. But you know what? I'm not going to argue.
I completely agree. And I think that that's a great point. Unfortunately, in this case, we didn't need it. But I think you have a great point. Right. You're absolutely right about it.
Right. And so at this point, okay. All right.
But I just want people to be mindful that we, doesn't have to take legislation to have, the administration act. This is something that, very too often it takes time to draft legislation. It's not something that 20 minutes and you introduce it. And, there's a lot of research and looking at what other municipalities are doing and drafts. And I think that it's important that that moving forward, whatever is in the budget intent memo, if we are, and to make sure that it's being accomplished. And if it's not being accomplished, that we send a clear message that, look, this is a priority to us. But I will pull it. And it's a little bit frustrating, but I know that this is not something that I'm the first one to go through. Many people deal with this at the state level when dealing with the executives, and people deal with this on the local level. So thank you, guys.
I think you have a really good point, and thank you for that.
Thank you. So we're nixing that resolution. Moving on, resolution 124, 12220 by myself. It's to make Councilmember Fahey a marriage officer. That'll be an intro, and I'd like to pass it. Ms. Fahey, you care to say Do I see you here?
I'm here.
Okay, there we go.
Yes, the individuals who are getting married don't have a date as of yet, so I wanted to have a longer period to be authorized for, just so that they can, you know, these decisions are tough during this time with the pandemic. So they haven't found a date yet, but they do have their license.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be voting on that on Monday. So members are okay with that, right? Moving forward with that, passing that. Okay. So that was on, still under resolutions introduced. We got a couple of MCs. Resolution 125, 122, 20R by Mr. Johnson, honoring the life and legacy of Father Young. I don't know if Mr. Johnson's here or not. We've all been around. If you've been around for any length of time in Albany, you understand and recognize the impact that Father Young has had on the city. So that'll be a pass. We'll be voting on that.
All co-sponsors?
All co-sponsors. Okay. All right. Good. Good. Okay. Okay. And so, and the next resolution is a resolution by me. It's 126, 122, 20R. MC, it's appointing the folks to the Violence Prevention Task Force. We had a public safety meeting. Well, we had two over 2 days where we interviewed a bunch of candidates, a lot of good candidates that I'd actually like to capture for some of our other boards and commissions if we could. And in the end, we chose the folks that we chose, and this resolution is recognizing and appointing those members. We'll be voting on that Monday. But all members, were you going to say something, Mr. Conti?
Yeah, I have a question because I'm still trying to wrap my head around the task force and how it works because we never discussed it last year. But the ordinance says that I'm just wondering to what extent the council is supposed to be appointing, since the ordinance says that the Public Safety Committee will establish a task force. So it doesn't provide a role for the council to appoint. It says the Public Safety Committee shall establish a task force, which is something similar, I think, was done about a year or so ago when we convened a bunch of stakeholders to discuss some, violence prevention issues. So I'm not sure where there is the requirement or the provision that we would appoint the council as a whole.
Okay, so, and that would actually work for me. Mr. Pichardo, can you?
Yeah, no, yes, it does say the public safety. Yeah, the Public Safety Committee would establish the task force. This is really just a formality just for the council to endorse it. It can go either way. Doesn't affect it either. I mean.
And what I would say was we ran into some issues with appointments, dual appointments to multiple boards. And if we were just establishing it and it was not an appointment, some of the folks that we're setting aside could actually serve. So that I would love it if.
I mean, the task force seems to be, I think maybe you're looking at the task force as too much of a formal commission or board, where it seems it's more of a less formal, but a task force that's advisory, that's convened at certain points of the year to look at issues in certain wards and develop kind of an action plan basically for the summer. And so it's, I think the committee has flexibility and again, since we never discussed this last year when we were voting on this, which would have been helpful, but I think the committee has flexibility in like pulling together what's needed at a given time in terms, and I'm not sure also in terms of stakeholders, because I'm looking at the ward breakdown and I just,
right. And based
see like a disconnect between the idea that the stakeholders are from wards, that are impacted or disproportionately impacted, but the members don't necessarily seem to reflect that.
So what my question would be then, so how about a resolution, and we could just edit this, establishing the Violence Prevention
Well,
Task
it's
Force
been
as a
established in the war, and
So is your point that we didn't need to do this to establish?
I don't know. I mean, because we never really discussed
right.
it. And it certainly doesn't
exactly.
say that, and it gives it.
There's a lot of
We've
ambiguity.
never had a situation where we put in code something where directing a committee to do something that's usually handled through our own rules process or whatever. And so it was awkward to have it done that way. But it does say that the Public Safety Committee will establish. And then, and as I say, I think, that's just, we've never had something like this before. So that's why I'm confused in terms of how to approach it. And I just was curious in terms of the members and the ward breakdown that I'm seeing. It doesn't seem to be connected with the intent that I think that the task force members come from those wards and their stakeholders and understand the issues and would then be able to kind of put together an action plan based on their experience within those wards that are most impacted, however that's defined. But I'm just was curious in terms of the members. They just seem to be a number of them coming from wards that I would not associate ones that are disproportionately impacted by violence.
Right, but and then there was some language in the equity agenda also that focused on folks from certain professions or violence prevention folks also. But then also you have to take into account that the applicants that we received were the applicants that we received. You can't put someone from another ward or one of the desired wards in there if they don't
right
apply.
Or
we had to work,
members from council members from those areas could also kind of recommend representation. But yeah,
so I mean we could do, we could do it that way. There's a lot that's undefined and unclear, but I apologize, Ms. Frederick, you were trying to get in there, and
yeah,
Mr. Ballard after her.
Just one additional point there. We also looked at the list of applicants, and obviously we didn't get the all the ward representation that we were hoping for, but there were a few members on that list who have very close affiliations to lower wards, either via their occupation and where they work, or they previously lived in there and they have family within the resounding areas. So we took that all into consideration, and we do think that the ones that we put forth are qualified and really have some very unique and unique ideas for solutions. And they're also very passionate to serve. So just wanted to add that.
Yep,
thanks for that, Mr. Ballard, and then Mr. Hoey.
A lot of this, thank you, Councilman Kelly. I apologize for that. A lot of this is in many ways still able to be designed as we move forward with the process. We had 19 applicants. We interviewed 17. We had great applicants. I really, we after our meetings, we were back and forth for quite some time because we had such high quality applicants. Every now and then to the group that we did, based on experience, where they lived in the city, the fact that some lived in the city. We had applicants who didn't live in the city as well that were interested in trying to help with the issue, but we really focused on getting individuals that lived in the city. And we even narrowed the amount of committee members that would be on the board to be able to increase the amount of individuals that we could select from the community to be on the board. So
I don't know that you can do that.
Well, we said officially we're going to have 2 members from the committee, and the rest can attend like everybody else that's open to attend. But we don't need 5 committee members from as
public safety.
Public safety. So I mean, to me, I believe these 7 individuals deserve a vote. It allows us to start the process. It allows us to, start working out the kinks. Yes, there's a lot we need to work out, but we've taken the time we've had these individuals give us their time. Some individuals waited because we were behind in our interview process as we asked more questions and people gave us more detailed answers. It pushed it back. So some individuals waited, up to an hour to get interviewed late at night. So I think we owe it to the community members, to give them a vote, an up and down vote. And I think we owe it to them to get this started and then, work out some of the kinks. I agree with you, Rich. I think if we can find a way to recruit additional individuals from those wards that are more heavily impacted, then we should do that. And, we have the ability to look at the number again. If we can have individuals that are able to, if we're able to recruit individuals from those communities, additional individuals, because we have some. I don't want to seem like we don't, but if we can recruit additional individuals from those communities, then yes, we can take a second look at expanding the number and how that would affect it. But I think a lot of work has been done to get us to this point. And I'm okay with voting on it on Monday.
Thank you, Mr.
Kelly?
Ballard. Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, unfortunately, last year, the one meeting I missed was the meeting that the equity agenda passed. And I really thought there'd be more talking on it before it got passed, but it is what it is. It's on the books. It's a law. Now, one of the things I brought up, there's a lot of holes in the, the creation of this task force. And I understand that. And, even at the meeting, I said, are we going to be working on this, to fix the ordinance itself and get more down into the nitty gritty? Now, I don't want to hold up the process for that because people want something done and they want it done soon. So, but in the meantime, we should be collecting data and, to come up with a good change, while we're doing it, to make sure we're just not spinning our wheels, that when we see things happening. I know Council Member Igo and Council Member Ballerin both said, we'll step off this task force because number one, the violence isn't as bad in our wards as in other wards, and we want to get more of the public involved. So, and I'm all for that we need to do it. But one of the things also is we need to be flexible because we have a new census out there. Ward lines will probably change and violence can move around. There's no predictor that says it's always going to be in this one spot violence. And, I hope we can get rid of the violence. I mean, that's what our ultimate goal is. But I do hope that we will change this ordinance and put in the stuff that we need to better define what we need. And I think the only way you can do that is to actually start the process and see how things shake out. Thank you.
And I, no problem. I think we need to move forward in this process. I think there's a lot of clarification that needs to be made in that part of the ordinance as well as other parts. Probably initially the task force really needs to focus on what its mission is and what it wants its focus to be and try to, set out an agenda. The other thing, just looking ahead, the other part of this process is the violence prevention funding, which was not in the budget, which the task force can come up with ideas or programmatic ideas for funding, but the task force itself doesn't decide the allocation of the funding. That's another process because it's kind of separated from the task force. The task force has a role in that, but that seems to be a whole different process that is done through a community participatory budgeting process, which I presume that the mayor or the budget division has to put together and run. So I don't know where they are in developing that process or understanding and how they're going to do it. The task force is part of it, but they're not there. They don't lead it. And so I'm just, wondering where that whole process is, if they're thinking about that. And there are actually kind of inconsistencies because there are two definitions. I mean, the task force side talks about wards disproportionately impacted by violence. And then the funding part talks about wards with the highest incidence and prevalence of violence. So I don't know why there's kind of subtle differences, but not consistent definitions in the two paragraphs. But as I say, the funding issue is down the road. It should be thought about now in terms of how that's going to be done, who's going to do it, how the mayor is going to put together a community process and who that involves, and what they might be thinking about in terms of funding, or if they're going to wait for the task force to come up with something which might, I don't know what the timeline in terms of when you want programming geared towards a summer plan, when you identify the funding and then you go through a process to allocate that funding. And is the allocation related to what the task force recommends, or is it a totally separate process? It's not really clear in terms of how this was drafted, but it is a separate process.
Right. And so I mean, if you have any suggestions for how you think maybe this should change,
I may have had that last year.
I would say offer that, but for now, we want to move forward. The equity agenda,
I'm not saying, I'm just
right. And the equity agenda issues.
That's another issue to think about now.
Right, and the equity agenda issues with funding and some of the other things that will fall on the mayor's folks and her administration. I got that on my list for the leadership meeting to try to get clarification and find out how they want to proceed with that, so I can get us some answers along those lines. Mr. Ballerin.
Yes, I just wanted to, clear why I took myself off. Not because I don't think there's a lot of violence in the 11th. I think we get out, unfortunately, we get our fair share of it. We had a shooting last Saturday. We had a homicide last Tuesday. We had another shooting Friday before that. And we had shot fired right around the block for me, last Wednesday. So we have our own fair share of violence that we see. But I also know that there were residents from the 11th who who applied and were selected to be on the board. So I'd rather one of them get the opportunity to have their voices heard than myself, because I have an opportunity. I have the means. I'm privileged and lucky enough to have been selected by my community to have a venue to be able to address that already. So to be able to give other individuals from the 11th ward an opportunity and a venue to be able to express their concerns, and so that there's multiple voices to those issues, is part of the reason why I recruited myself. I just want to make that clear. I don't want people to think that I don't think we have serious issues in my neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ballerin. Staying or moving into resolutions held.
Yeah, Owusu had his hands up, but I don't know if you heard it.
Go ahead, Owusu.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to, say that I sat on the interviews for the task force members. These are, quite frankly, the best of the best. And, I understand what Richard is saying as relates to the equity agenda and what the goal was. But, if we were to go to war with violence prevention in the city of Albany, these are the people that I would want by my side. If you look at their resume, their vision, their contribution to the city, their experience, I just don't want to take, these are the best individuals that we could have, for the people who made the decision to pick these individuals who are going to really, I firmly believe, will put a dent in the violence that we're seeing in our city. So I just wanted to share that. And I want to thank everybody who was on the Public Safety Committee who stood there from day one, asking the right questions of the candidates, because this is an important, task force. And we have to make sure that individuals are committed into finding solutions. This is a wonderful city, and we want to make sure that people understand that the violence that we're witnessing is not going to last long, and we are committed in eradicating this violence. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anani. Thank you for raising your hand and waiting. That was a refreshing change. Moving into resolutions held.
Councilmember Kimbrough, can I just jump in there really quickly before we get into resolutions held? You had emailed earlier about what seemed to be a numbering discrepancy, and that is my fault. I had forgotten to include on the support legislation resolution about real property tax law, section 1111A. JR had sent that to me for inclusion with the rest of the legislation for this agenda, and I just forgot to put it on the actual support legislation document. So I don't know if the council would want to move that or add that to the agenda by MC, or how the council would like to proceed on that. JR could probably speak better to whether there's a need to get that on this agenda.
Is it time sensitive or?
According to Rob McGee, it's not, but the sooner the better.
Okay, will it keep till our next meeting?
I think it should be fine. I'll follow up with him.
Being okay. All right.
I'll follow up with him.
Okay.
And then I suspect there needs to be an MC forthcoming from Darius regarding the bid re-levy. I do not have the numbers yet for that, but that should be forthcoming before Monday.
Okay, thank you. Just set a placeholder for that. So moving on to resolutions held, I had a brief conversation and was reached out to by Ms. Love and regarding agenda item number 7, resolution 11-2120R for the establishing the Black Caucus. Did you want to request that or say something about wanting to move that, Ms. Love or Mr. Robinson? You're muted. You're still muted.
Well, talking to Councilman Robinson earlier, he wants to wait until he has another conversation with, he sent out a text and nobody responded.
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah.
But I will say this.
We'll hold on. I didn't want to, because you asked me and I wanted to give you the opportunity. Go ahead, Mr. Anani.
Yeah, I think this is essentially a formality. I mean, the vote will be on Monday. So I think just Councilmember Love would just wanted to give you guys a heads up. So it has been moved out of committee already. And,
right.
But I think it was pulled from the floor, but I think that it's moved out of committee. There were individuals who had some amendments. I think Councilmember Hoey had some amendments to it, and we made that change. So again, I think this is just a formality to tell you guys that should be asking for it for a vote on Monday. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Any ideas to give put members on notice and let people know what's coming and what we're doing or what's being discussed. So that's that.
Mr. President Pro Tem, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
I said that was kind of what Mr. Anani said about just putting folks on notice about, he's saying that, you know, there was a discussion that this is just a formality. And I'm saying, yeah, we have to do this because members have to consider this. So we can't just show up at the meeting and say, let's do it. We gotta have a discussion in our caucus regarding whatever piece of legislation that we're going to consider in the following meeting. So my point is just what Mr. Anani said. We want people to know.
I'm sorry, is this a discussion for the next caucus, or is this what? I'm unclear.
I think the idea and the request for Ms. Love was, can we vote to pass it? Is what her question to me the other day was. So.
All right, next.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Conti? Okay.
I mean,
all right.
It would be helpful to have, if there was changes made, it would be helpful to have that.
Right. Mr. Anani, do you have those adjustments, those amendments?
Yeah, I don't have that with me, but we will forward it to everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item under resolution cell 11, it's resolution 115, 120, 120R. It's consenting to the transfer of unassigned funds to cover wage increases. That's 11. I'm not sure if it went through finance yet and passed.
No,
But we certainly have one tomorrow. You have a finance.
We're
meeting.
going to be discussing it tomorrow.
Pending the outcome of tomorrow's finance meeting, we'll be voting on that. Okay. All right. So that is it for the agenda. What I'd like to say is, and Jenny, do you have anything?
I would just want to briefly say thank you to Richard for sharing the pay equity RFP, and to Owusu. Owusu had mentioned possibly adding in women and race, and I've asked that question because if we can add that in, then we absolutely should. And so they're looking into that.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, okay, lastly, before turning it over to the school district and the superintendent, remember we have our African-American.
Kelly, oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think I talked to Kelly about this and other people about this. I'm going to discharge local law G out of committee on Monday. I know I've asked certain council members to be prime sponsors and I've got some good response. And for those who are not familiar, local law G of 2018 is calling for a study to be done on providing residents with a high-speed internet service. One of the things that we have witnessed during this pandemic is that we have seen how vital internet service is and how many families in our city are being left behind because they don't have access to the internet. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we have our African-American African-American month celebration, February 17th. It's going to be 5:30 to 7:30 via Zoom at this point because we're still more than likely going to be dealing with the pandemic. We really like to get participation from all members, from all wards, and if members need help locating or choosing awardees, we can help. There are members that can help you so choose. We're trying to do this or get this stuff together for our staff by the 21st. Bios and information on who we're gonna choose by January 21st, so we can put this together. Typically, you're going up to the last minute and things change and they're scrambling trying to make this stuff work for us. It'd be really nice to this year take the time, choose our folks, get the information to our staff so we can move forward and get this all squared away ahead of time. So thank you for that. And I will, with that, turn it over to Superintendent Adams.
Hi, good evening to the council, and thank you so very much for this opportunity to be here. We are always happy to come and provide an update with what's going on with the district and then be able to answer any questions that you may have. At this time, I believe we need to make arrangements to share our screen, or if you have the PowerPoint, we can go right through it. And so with us this evening, we have our president of the Board of Education, Ann Savage. We also have Deputy Superintendent Kimberly Roaring here with us tonight, and our Director of Communications and Operations, Mr. Ron Lesko. So I will go through the slides, and then when we get ready to talk about some of the fiscal impacts, I will have our board president talk about that, as well as some of the advocacy. So as we move forward, we always start with our vision, mission, and goals to make sure that all of our actions are aligned with that. And one of the things that we have been very focused on are the equitable opportunities for our students during this COVID time. It has produced quite a few challenges. We have, much like in our city and in our country, we have seen some of those inequities just really magnify and become significant issues as we move forward. And so even though those pieces have come into play, we are always focused on student achievement, looking to make sure that we are delivering quality instruction, building our leadership capacity, empowering our families, and of course, partnering with our diverse community. Tonight, our discussion is going to talk about some of the academic components of what we've been able to do, our access and opportunity that we've been able to open for our students as we go into phase 2. And then we look at our instructional technology update. And then as you talk about equity with regard to the Common Council, we as a school district have our equity policy and looking at culturally responsive teaching and learning and how we are looking to promote equity as a way of doing business in our school district. We know that there are some challenges, but we are still working to work through those challenges. And then we'll finish up with just an update for COVID-19 and then the fiscal impact and advocacy that we as a district are engaging in. For the academic overview, we have 2 models of instruction. We have a virtual option, which is for all grade levels. And then we have our in-person option for pre-kindergarten through 6th grade and then K-12 special education. We did do a phased in approach at the beginning of the school year so that we took the first 2 weeks to, it was virtual instruction, and we did early release for professional development so that we could improve and work with our teachers on the delivery of instruction, both in person in a social distance environment, as well as looking at that virtual component. What does online instruction look like? And so we did our grade level phase-in process, and I think that was a good way for our students and our in-person teachers to understand the protocols that we needed to have in place opening in a COVID-19 environment. And then, of course, that instructional delivery, what does that look like in a social distance environment? The phase 2 that we have been looking at since mid-October has dealt with our hands-on opportunities. We have expanded our STEM outreach. We've even gone into the neighborhood with regard to STEM activities where teachers are teaching from remote locations, and they are exposing children to the hands-on project-based learning via the computer for our virtual learners, but also in person, being able to have them go outside and do a multitude of projects. We have also looked at our career and technical education program, and we've looked at how we can do hands-on. One example is even within our culinary department, the students can pick up the food kits, and then they go home and they have their cameras on and they go through the lesson with the instructor, and then they show their finished product. We've also made arrangements for a number of our career and technical education classes to meet in person in small groups. So we have cosmetology, health sciences, and also our construction course, and human sciences with regard to our students that go in for certification for CNA. The last component within our phase 2 is fine arts, art, and performing arts, where our music students are able to come in. We did order the specialized masks that they can use with their instruments, as well as the masks that go over the actual wind instruments so that we can meet in small groups. And it has been phenomenal. They totally enjoy it. It just helps them be able to not just play online together, but they can also play their instruments in one area, socially distanced, of course. And that's the same for chorus as well as for orchestra. In our fine arts, we're looking at art, and we have brought in only 2 of our art programs so that we can see how it works with the hands-on art. And then we're looking at expanding that as we move to the next quarter, the third 9 weeks. So instructional technology, we've had some challenges with our instructional technology. There is a worldwide pandemic that is going on. And we have 5,200 Chromebooks that were ordered in July, and our delivery has been delayed due to circumstances beyond our control. It is the manufacturing of those Chromebooks, and we are awaiting them. We were told early in the summer that they would be here by September, then we were told November, and we are still waiting on those computers. I know that many people understanding that process, and I'll just take a moment to explain the process of the 5,200 Chromebooks. Earlier in the year, in March, we did apply for a Smart Schools grant. The grant was not approved until July. And when the grant was approved, that was when we could place the order. And we placed the order the same day that the grant money was approved. If we didn't have the funds, we would not have been able to order those Chromebooks. So that's the part of the district. And then the rest of it has been just working through just the sheer manufacturing of the devices. And so a couple of things that we've done with regard to the strengths of what we're seeing, the shared responsibility, making sure that we can pivot into remote learning or in-person learning, and making sure that our teachers have those resources, and developing a deeper skill set as we move forward. And then of course, working to close that digital divide is something that we are focused on. When we look at our community support, I must applaud the community with regard to all of the efforts with instructional technology, where our community has literally stepped up to help us close that digital divide. We are so appreciative with Albany Fund for Education that just picked up by the bootstraps and said, what can we do to help? How can we help get to a one-to-one ratio with our students? And next slide, please. And AFE really stepped up, and they have worked with getting computer donations. They have looked at refurbished computers, and to date, we're looking at a little bit more than 120 computers. And just so that you know what this means, we have approximately, well, we had approximately 1,700 students that were still sharing computers. And in order to reduce that number to get one-to-one, that sharing of computers would be roughly 3, 4, 5 students in the home. And so where AFE has been very instrumental in helping us is in those homes where we have multiple students, they have been able to close that digital divide, so that now if there are 4 students in the home, there may be 4 computers for the students, or maybe they were able to increase it by 1. So now only 2 students are sharing the computers versus, you know, all 4 trying to have 1 computer. And so I really have to acknowledge their support. In addition to that, Hannaford Supermarkets has donated $75,000 today. We were at that press conference today to AFE to support additional Chromebooks and remote learning purchases. And so that will help us close that digital divide even more so. And so we are very grateful to Hannaford Supermarkets. Another piece that we have coming is Workforce Development Institute is looking at donating 100 Chromebooks to our CTE students because of that online learning and what they are doing with the project-based learning online. We have Albany Public School Administrators Association donated 20 Chromebooks directly to our students. Metropolitan Baptist Church donated 10 Chromebooks to 10 students at Arbor Hill Elementary School. We had an anonymous donor with 10 Chromebooks at Montessori. And then the next piece is part of a bigger picture. We partnered with T-Mobile, and we were able to secure 600 hotspots because in our initial survey, information came back that many of our families did not have internet access. So we were able to secure 600 hotspots and position them with our families who needed internet connectivity. The other piece that I think is important to note is we have students that are homeless students who live in shelters, and these are called our McKinney-Vento students. We were able to put hotspots and Chromebooks at our shelters so that our homeless students now have access so that they can, if they are learning virtually and they are not in person, they can absolutely access their lessons. And so along with those hotspots, the Center of Educational Innovation donated hotspots to O'Neill Middle School. And so I think this slide is so important because it just goes to show how we are all in for Albany and that our community supports us and supports our students. And we are so very appreciative to all of our partners in education. And so as we move forward and talk about equity in education, in January of 2019, our board passed its first ever equity policy. We did that work with community members, parents. We had student focus groups to look at what equity would be in our school district. And in a nutshell, our equity policy challenges us to remove those systemic barriers that create obstacles and challenges for our students to be successful. And sometimes it's in the policies that we have, it's in the procedures that we do. And part of that is looking at how we do business, the policies that we have, our process and procedures that are documented in our standard operating procedures manuals, and making sure that as we look at those policies and procedures, that we look at it through an equity lens, because we know that there was not an intent for inequitable practices, but now that we know better, we are called to do better. So it means that as we move through with our policy here in place, we need to re-examine how we do business to make sure that we are removing those systemic barriers for our children so that they can be successful. When we look at our next steps with regard to equity in education, that first bullet is critical. Making sure that our students have access to the grade level standards is one of the most critical things that we can do in education to make sure that our students are receiving an equitable education. And that's regardless of their learning levels. It's about modifying assignments. It's about looking at our expectations. It's about how we deliver instruction, which is why that delivery of quality instruction is so very important, because that is where we need to ensure that we are making sure that all of our students have access to grade level standards and that we are exposing them and educating them at grade level. That way they have a fighting chance of moving beyond grade level. And so with the other bullets that are there, those are the things that we look at in terms of our next steps with regard to equity and making sure that our students have the opportunities that they so rightly deserve. Next, we will talk about where we are in terms of COVID-19, our status update. As of today, within the school district, we have 73 confirmed cases. This is roughly a little bit more than 1%. That information we have to change in the bullet. But it's a little bit more than 1% of our in-person learners, and that includes faculty, staff, and students. And total cases on site, 52, and total cases involving off-site, 21. And so we are continuing, the next slide, please. We are continuing with all of our protocols with regard to the COVID-19 precautions, the cleaning and sanitization of our spaces, making sure that we are doing the temperature checks with our students, also that they are wearing masks and that hand hygiene is extremely important. We observe the social distancing and any additional guidance that DOH provides to us, we move forward quickly to implement those particular guidelines. Our employees and students have done an excellent job with regard to the protocols, and we do have communication almost daily to keep our public up to date with what is happening. At this time, I will turn it over to President Savage to talk about the COVID-19 fiscal impact and our steps moving forward.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having us tonight. We always enjoy an opportunity to watch how the sausage gets made at your meetings and then also fill you in on where we are. Some of this is review. I know all of you follow this very carefully, so you know that earlier this year, there was an announcement out of the Department of Budget that there would be likely a 20% reduction in state aid, which would of course impact our high needs districts like Albany and locally Schenectady, Troy, and across the state, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, much more heavily than it impacts suburban districts, since we are more, our budgets are more reliant on state aid. So that budget impact of 20%, which we still do not know, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, how that will impact us, could be anything between $16 million if it were just foundation aid and $23 million if it were to apply to all aids. And that's never been clarified by DOB. So you can move forward, Danielle. Because of that, we took the very difficult decision to reduce our staff, and that was extraordinarily difficult. And I know it's been frustrating to all of us in the city to have to do that. I know that we would all have liked to wait and see. The challenge for the district in the wait and see approach is that unfortunately our state aid comes at the end of the year. That about 66% of our total state aid payments come between March and the following September of the year. So if we do wait and see approach, we end up in a very big, very deep hole very quickly. And so we have to act more quickly. It's an unfortunate side effect of the way things line up. We did absolutely everything in our power to mitigate the budget impact. If you move to the next slide, Danielle, you'll see that we have a very, very limited reserve in for school districts. It's quite different than for municipalities. We're limited, as I know several of you who've sat on the school board know, to no more than 4% of our unallocated, of our budget in unallocated fund balance. That's a very small number. We still allocated half of that to the budget to try and mitigate some of the potential for layoffs as much as we could. Of course, we do have other reserves, right, that are not part of that unallocated balance, just as you all do. Sorry. Anyway, just as you all do, we do have other reserves, but those are dedicated reserves for specific purposes. There was a law that allowed us to draw from those reserves. However, it wasn't like, hey, you can have this money. It was, you can borrow from yourself and pay yourself back with interest. So it doesn't really help very much, but that was an option that we did look at. We have been seriously impacted by COVID fiscally. And if you move forward, I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary on that. The impact to date is about $5.5 million. And that's real dollars. That's not the, oh, maybe they're going to reduce us 20% number. These are real actual dollars. So there's several aspects of this. We have been withheld so far $1.4 million. So I know that there was an op-ed in the newspaper that said that no withholding had been done. That was playing a little fast and loose with the facts, because what they said in the op-ed was that no withholding had been done from this academic year, the one we're currently in, which is true. But they had withheld from the prior academic year, which we have never been paid this $1.4 million. That was predominantly for special education, including the ESY program, which is our summer education for our students who are in self-contained special ed classrooms. Another place where we've got some unreimbursed expenses is transportation. You may have seen some of this go by in the paper. If not, I'm happy to share all of these details with you. Generally, the City School District of Albany is reimbursed about 79% out of every dollar on transportation. However, despite the strong encouragement from the governor's office, and of course we wanted to use our transportation to help kids get food, which we did, they later clarified that they might not reimburse us for the expenses related to food transportation, right? We also have a contract with CDTA, which requires us to pay that contract, and they had laid out expenses, so there's some additional transportation expenses in there. Our most recent withholding is an interesting one. This is the CARES Act money, which we were anticipating would be part of our normal state aid payment. They instead withheld that money. There will be a process, presumably, that we will get that money back. So that $700,000 should be coming back to us eventually, but it did not come as we expected. And then we have had about $1 million in additional expenses. And you have, we sent to the council, I don't know if you guys have gotten all this backup material yet, but it's in an email that went as far as Danielle, at least. that lays out what that $900,000 is. But it's things like PPE, it's things like some of those transportation costs that we don't ever expect to get back. It's things like postage. You all may recall that we got to do a vote by mailing every single registered voter in the City School District of Albany a ballot, which was an exciting way to do a ballot, resulting in about 11,000 votes in school board, about 3 times as many as usual. So that was great, but it did cost us about $150,000 that was not budgeted for. So all of those together come up to about $1 million. And all of that is about $3.5 million actual cash. Plus, when we started this year with the governor's executive budget, we got one number for state aid, and we instantly lost $2 million off the top of that as we were even constructing the budget. So from our way of looking at it, it's about a $5.5 million hit. So we are encouraging people to advocate. We've sent you, as part of the packet, our legislative priorities. The 2 most important ones are the ones that I think you will be familiar with, is that we are hoping that people will advocate for an equitable and not equal distribution of the pain for whatever cut there needs to be. We still don't know whether that would be, a 20% cut, a 10% cut, a 5% cut. We really have no idea, because everyone, as far as we can tell in the Department of Budget, is waiting to see what happens at the federal level, right? And what happens at the federal level and how that money flows to the state is going to impact rather significantly what they're able to do for schools. No one, I think, hopes or believes that we're going to get 100% of the state aid we were initially promised. It just doesn't look promising for that. If it does, that would be wonderful. If it doesn't, we'd like people to advocate for the distribution to be equitable, so that high needs districts would not, it wouldn't be an across the board 20% or 10%, but rather it would be a progressive cut. So the high needs districts would have a smaller cut. The other one, which is unique to Albany and is a little tricky to talk about, is the charter payments, right? We have the most, at least I know, I have the most tremendous respect for families that choose charters. I understand why families choose charters. And I have nothing against those folks, but the actual budget impact on us is extreme. Our payment to charter schools is still over $35 million of our budget goes directly to charter schools. And as they were talking about it this a couple months ago, when we first heard about the 20%, we were not hearing that there was going to be a corresponding reduction to our charter payment. So that's our second major point of advocacy for us, is if you must reduce our state aid, we really need to see a corresponding reduction in our charter payment. Otherwise, the 85% of Albany students that are educated in the district schools are going to get squeezed, because we're going to still pay their charter payment as much as we were with less money. So we do have some information on that page that's listed there, albanyschools.org/advocacy, where you can go and see some sample letters. But we've also provided in your packet our legislative priorities that we have shared with Pat and John and with Neil. And we will also be meeting, as we have been for the last several years, with the education committees on the Assembly side and on the Senate side. So that's the quick and dirty on the finances. And now I think everybody's available to answer any questions that people have.
Go ahead, Judy.
Thank you. So with regard to advocacy, would it help for us to have one letter from all the Common Council members advocating that we could have you work with our staff to put together, or a formal resolution or something like that?
I don't know. I actually don't know what is more effective, and I'm open to any suggestions that you all have. You all are extremely experienced in state advocacy as well, whether you would prefer and think it's more effective to do one letter or individual letters. I know that we would be happy to help you craft a letter that you could either sign individually or as a group, whatever made the most sense.
So what does leadership think about that? Having us all sign on to a letter, or other people think about us all signing on to a letter, make sure that we get our voices out there as soon as possible in support of advocating on these two issues?
I think absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And I agree.
So can we have JR, are you here still? Could you work on that with Ann?
And we can also include Ron Lesko, our communications director, so that working on that draft and then, run it through to make sure that everyone's okay with, with that support.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because Ron is paid and Ann is doing this on a voluntary basis, and I appreciate everything that she does, but where we can take some burden off of her, I think that's a good idea.
And plus, every time Ron touches my writing, he makes it better. So it's another excellent reason to do it that way.
So is JR, I see JR is muted here. Hi,
I'm
JR.
here, sorry.
So can we have you work on that with Ron Lesko? Doing
The resolution?
a resolution or a letter.
Or
I think we're good with doing a letter so that we don't have to wait to get it out. I think for a formal vote, I think everybody's signing on at this point, because I'm realizing, okay, so Monday's our last meeting. I don't know, maybe we could get it done, a resolution done by then, but one or the other.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see Tom and then Kathy. I don't know who's calling.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, how incredibly upset, and I think we all share this, and how many cuts were made to the district. Just, the financial impact. Is there any other district that was affected to the extent that Albany City Schools was throughout the state?
Yes, there were a number of them. Schenectady was affected. They had initially they had about 400 layoffs, and then they had another 200 a little bit later on after the school year started. They would be the closest one to us, but there have been several districts throughout the state that have been impacted, largely the larger school districts.
And we can share with you, Kathy, if you'd like. We have a good chart that really helps you understand why, because different school districts have a different portion of their budget based on state aid. And Albany is at about 45% right now. 45% of our budget is state aid. Schenectady and Troy are at about 59 and 61%. And then some of the big five districts are very, very high, like 80%, 90%. It's kind of astonishing. So the bigger percentage of your budget that is at risk, the more seriously you had to anticipate that potential reduction.
Well, it's just absolutely outrageous that our district has been affected by this. I mean, when you compare us to our surrounding school districts, there's really no excuse for it. And, we've been fighting this fight for years, but the pandemic has really shown the reality of it all in a big way. So anything we can do to help, really.
I do want to just add that in large part because of the good work of Pat Fahey and John McDonald, the percentage of our budget that has been provided by state aid has actually been growing rather significantly over the years. I know that Pat has told me that when she was on the board, when she was board president, it was only about 33 or 34% state aid. So that's good, right? The state has been distributing their funds slightly more equitably. However, when the larger percentage of your budget that is reliant on state aid, the more impacted you are when there is a crisis of this kind, right? Because then it's just one big swoop on your state aid. So, Tom, I think you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, boy, this issue is very hot with me. I have a son who's in 8th grade. I have 2 grandchildren going to Eagle Point, in grammar school. My son was here right now. He would tell you it sucks. The online learning does not work. It's just, I just asked the superintendent about the music. My son plays violin. So I'm paying for private lessons so he doesn't fall behind because he's in middle school. We talk about the letter. We put a letter together over the summer. We had the mayor sign off, and I know there was a reach out, and this, at the time, nobody wanted to sign on from the school district, which was a shame. Although what we were looking for didn't pass anyhow. We were looking for federal aid. So we definitely need some kind of help. I'm really concerned about the lack of Chromebooks. You know, my son had gotten a Chromebook. I went out and got him a laptop, and we returned the Chromebook to try to help some other students out. You know, it's just, I'm just wondering, has there been a reach out maybe to the university for surplus equipment, something like that? But I also want to bring up, that's just an idea to look at, and I'll be glad to reach out. I work at the university. I'm very concerned about the sports. You know, in middle school, you did away with all the sports in middle school. I'm also very upset about the number of layoffs in the unionized sector. There was only a couple of, from what I read in the paper, only a couple of MCs let go of. Again, we have more chiefs than Indians sometimes, and I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the charter schools. What if the school districts just cut the aid to the charter schools by 20% and do the legal thing, you know, really put pressure on the governor or the legislature? You know, they created this mess, and our children here in Albany are suffering. So it's not an easy situation, but being on the city council, we're dealing with the same problem. We've had a 20% cut, and, you know, maybe we've had a little bit more reserves, thank God. But, you know, if we don't get aid soon, we're going to have problems. But, you know, thanks to the election, you know, I'm hoping if we can win the Senate in Georgia, maybe we won't have this problem in a few months. But one, I know I've thrown a lot out there, but the one thing that really frustrates me is that if the aid came in, once, what I heard is once the budget's made, even if we got the aid, we can't do anything this year. We have to wait a year. And that just doesn't make sense to me, that if you get money, why can't you turn around and use it? And, you know, it's our kids we're talking about. Thank you.
There was a lot there. I'll start with the last one, and then we can decide how much time, and you and I can also take it offline, and we can answer some of your other questions if you want. But in terms of can we use the money if it comes? And the answer is that we very carefully decided to vote, and this was actually, the board took a very, in my opinion, courageous position and took a lot of flack, because as you know, we are always a very public input oriented board, but we voted very quickly on the budget this year because we had heard, which turned out not to be true, like so many things in this year, that the governor's first round of reductions was going to be coming down the pike within the next couple of days, and if we didn't vote, we would have had to integrate those reductions into our budget, because what we are prevented from doing by law is spending more money than the taxpayers approved in the May budget vote. That's something that makes school districts radically different than cities. Y'all don't have to have your budget approved by referendum, but we do each and every year. And if the budget is approved by the voters, we cannot spend 1 penny more than that. So we had to budget and put in front of the voters the amount of money that the governor had on the table at that minute. And if we had waited and that had come down by 20% or 10% or 5%, and we would have obviously had to integrate that into our thinking and put that lower number in front of the voters. And if we did that, and then there was federal money to pull that back, that's when we would have been in the situation you were describing. But because we proactively decided to vote as early as we could before there were any cuts, we didn't put ourselves in that position. But that is a real difference between school districts and municipalities, is the budget has to be voted on by referendum. I guess the other one, I'd be happy to send you guys the charts of where the reductions came from. There were many more than a few reductions among our administrative ranks, many more. It was, and I don't have the number in front of me because I haven't thought about this in a couple of months, but I think it was more than 20% of our administrators. Remember that in school districts, the vast, vast, vast majority, just like it is in the city, of employees are our frontline people, right? Teachers, teachers' aides, hall monitors. Those are the people that are there in numbers. We only have, I think, in our AXA unit, I think we're down to 58 or 60 administrators for the entire district, right? You know, it's not really a lot. So it's hard when people say you cut so many of this and so few of this, well, there aren't that many administrators to begin with. And when you look at the percentages, there was a very large percentage of administrators who were reduced. And I hope everyone will hear this. We need to shift some things in this district, right? That equity policy, that's not just for show. That is for real. We are going to change this district and make it better. And I love our teachers. I love them. All of you know that I have 2 kids who have thrived in the City School District of Albany, and I love every child in Albany City School District the same because I'm the school board president. But I do love my own 2 more, and they are thriving because they have fabulous, fabulous teachers. But you know what teachers do all day? They teach. If you want radical changes happening to the structure of your district, you do need some administrators to do that. That's how you get change to happen. I'm not saying teachers aren't involved in the change. I'm not saying they don't participate in the change, but you do need some people leading the charge if you want to get us to a place where we're not looking at a 68% graduation rate, right? Where we want all of our children graduated, and we certainly do not want the black-white achievement gap. Let's not call it an achievement gap. Let's call it the graduation rate gap that we're looking at to continue. It has to be addressed, and that has to be done under the leadership of an administrative team.
Thank you.
I think Councilmember Anani has his hand raised.
Just want to say thank you so much for everything that's happening with the school district. I know this is a challenging time. I also want to say that, sometimes when I'm driving on Washington Avenue, just the new building, the improvements that is being made, it's quite frankly astonishing. Sometimes I feel like it's a spaceship. So I just want to thank everyone who made the effort to make sure that our kids get a school that we could all be proud of, a school that belongs to the 21st century. So I just want to thank everybody who helped in making sure that this dream became a reality. So I have a list of questions, and so the first one is that there are many reports talking about this school year as being a lost year for many students who are working remotely and have limited access to the resources that might have been available pre-pandemic. My question is, what policies and plans in place do you have to mobilize and help move our students forward?
So I can start with that one. So there are a number of things that we have done. We have looked at, I'll go back to our 5 goals, because that is the core of what we do. When we look at student achievement, what are those things that will help us with that? Well, right now, we do have challenges, and we've not denied that with regard to what online instruction looks like for our students, because we were not a district that had an online platform. And so when you look at the fact that we had to build that platform and then educate our teachers about that platform, educate our students about that platform, educate our support staff about that platform, it is a complete education or re-education of an entire organization. And so that is no small feat. And so what we have done in looking at that student achievement component, we've done what we call a backwards map, in that here's where our students were when we transitioned to online learning in March. We've looked at the assessment, we've looked at the gaps that existed there. And now that some of our students are back in person, we are looking at some of those in-person gaps that we're seeing, and teachers who are teaching remotely are looking at where the gaps are with regard to the students that they are instructing. So from there, that data is collected, and we have been doing professional development with our instructional supervisors and our coaches to look at how do we deliver instruction differently. And I know it sounds like, oh, well, you just train some people and then they go out and do it. No, it doesn't happen that easily. Teachers have been teaching a certain way for so many years. And I'm not saying that way is wrong. I'm saying that was the way in which instruction was delivered. So now that we have the professional development, they have to have time to receive the professional development, practice that professional development, and then make it their own with their students. And we have really compressed the time frame for that to give teachers that opportunity to engage in that professional development. We're looking at our common planning time, and also the time that they have with their coaches. Also the professional development time. We have some early release days built in so that our teachers can get that professional development that they need in order to better their craft, to enhance their skill set. The other pieces that we're doing, and I'm going to pivot a little bit from the academics because it is such a key component. We are working with that social and emotional well-being of the child, looking at the mental health component. As you know, with COVID, a lot of things are not in person. And so we've had to look at what are those teletherapies and those telesessions that we have to do, much like if you're going to your own doctor, there's teletherapy for physical therapy, OT, PT, those kinds of things. So when we are working with our students, we are looking at that social emotional component, and we're looking at how do we do counseling in an online environment. It's not anything that we have done before. So we are working through those measures with some of our partners, our community partners and agencies that we partner with. And now let's expand that a little bit more. So not only are we learning about that process, the agencies that do the wraparound services, guess what they're doing too? They're also learning about how to work and thrive in an online environment. So what I will say is this pandemic is not in one area. And many times when organizations face challenges, it may be one or two areas that you're working on at one time in order to improve or to do better. As a school district, as a city, as a state, as a country, every single aspect of our lives have been impacted by COVID-19. Everything we do is not aligned with something that we have done before. And so you have an entire society that is learning how to do things differently. Now, couple that with the fact that we live in a society that is very immediate. We want everything right now, here, now, you know, the microwave. If it takes too much, if it takes longer than a minute to heat it up in the microwave, I don't have time for it. We are a society of everything happening in a split second and immediacy. It is not going to happen for not just our school district, for our city, for our state. We have generational impacts that we are looking at right now. And so the decisions that we're making while we're impacting right now will have consequences down the line. And so I share the frustration. I don't run from it. I let you know right up front, these are the challenges that we have, and we're going to hit them right on. But this is also the environment that we are in. And so all of the steps that we are taking with regard to, and I do have to go back to professional development. It's not just the professional development of our teachers, it's our support staff and our administrators alike. Everyone, our board is also included in that. They are participating in professional development as well. We are looking at, I'm going to jump right back into that equity component. Because so many inequities have been exposed in so many walks of life, we have to hit that head on. And I have our book study that we're doing, the unconscious bias in our school system, looking at race and racism in school districts and how that plays a part in how we do business. How do we tackle that and break down all of those barriers? A lot of what we have to do is rethink how we do business. And that goes right down to the delivery of quality instruction for our students. But also, we're in a situation where right now we have virtual learning, we have in-person learning. And we have to make sure that in each of those environments where we are right now, that we are doing our very best to provide a quality education for our students. It is not perfect, and I don't think anyone has said that it's perfect, but there are some bright spots that we are going to highlight and share, because those ideas that are working are the things that we need to model throughout and share throughout our organization. And so I hope that answers your question about the things that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to follow up with that too also. As it relates to what % of students are not signed up for remote learning, and what is happening to engage them to participate in the remote learning?
So we,
They're not logging in when you say signed up for remote learning. How many are not connecting in?
And you're breaking up. It's really hard to hear. I don't know.
So let me ask the clarifying piece. You're saying signed up for remote learning. So our 7th through 12th grade students are virtual learners.
Yeah.
Kindergarten, well, pre-K through 6th grade, they have a virtual option. If parents chose that, they can do that. And then all of our special education students, self-contained, are in person. So if you want to look at, let me help shape this a little bit, because I think I know what you're asking. Of those 7th through 12th graders, how many students are not engaging online?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we have approximately 80, 90 students that have not logged in. And so what are we doing with those? I'm gonna just say with those 90 students. So we have our social workers, our counselors, teachers themselves have contacted and reached out to families. We have our homeschool coordinators that are making home visits, with those particular students. Some of those situations we're finding it's not related to a computer. It's related to those wraparound services that we need to get to our children. And so when our homeschool coordinators have done those home visits, they are finding those things out, and then we can connect out those families with those services that they need. We have a community outreach coordinator who is connected with not just AFE, but also with HADIS, also with Wardrobe, Wizard Wardrobe, the different entities around town that can help get those families what they need. And I will say that one of the things connected to technology, we are now participating in the T-Mobile Project 10 Million. I don't know if you've seen all the promos on television, but we have 500 additional hotspots so that we can help provide families with that internet access.
Thank you. So my next question is, reportedly 20% of the children in the school district don't have Chromebooks. In a school district with 80% minority, what percentage of them don't have access to the devices?
Okay, so I'm going to separate that out because we have about 60% of our students have a district device, and then we have their own personal devices, another 25%, and then roughly 15% of the students are sharing computers, okay? And so zero access, that number, I don't have a number of zero access. The deepest level that I have is that kids are sharing. And so if you count in that 15%, if you want to say that's about 1,500 of our kids, maybe 1,540 or so, there are 1,500 kids that are sharing computers. So if we want to say that they don't have a computer, that would be the gap that we're trying to close with our community donations. We started out at 1,700 roughly. We've received quite a few. We're down to about 1,540 or so, but that's the number of students that are sharing.
So my question more so was, so the 1,700, out of the 1,700 individuals without Chromebook, how many of those, what percentage is minority out of the 1,700?
Those were our students that were sharing. So I'm very specific about that because one of the things that we did when we started this process is we did the survey at the beginning to get the information from our families to look at having at least one device in the household, okay? Because we knew that we did not have enough to go one-to-one. And so when you talk about that number is really important, that we're talking about students that are sharing computers. So your question is breaking down by ethnicity. And so you're talking about the number of students who do not have their own device or who are sharing a device?
Who don't have their own device, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so to break that down by ethnicity, let me see here. I have shared access. We are looking at, I'd have to run some numbers really quickly. So I have sole access to the district. So district, let me give you kind of a comprehensive view. So students that have a district device, about 54% are African American and 20% are Hispanic. Our Caucasian students, about 12.5, mixed ethnicity, 6% roughly, Asian Pacific Islander, roughly about 6%. So that's with a district device. When we talk about shared access, about 43% African American, 20% Hispanic, 19% Caucasian, Asian Pacific Islander, roughly 10%, and mixed ethnicity would be about 6%. And so you have to understand that as a district, we are 48% African American, 20% Hispanic, 16% Caucasian, about 8% Asian Pacific Islander, and about 6% mixed ethnicity. So when you look at the breakdown of those, it's comparable to the total population.
And then my last question, in my estimation, lack of educational opportunities and employment opportunities correlate to the violence in the city. What solution do you think would help remedy this situation in our city? And what can we do as council members to help?
So when you talk about the violence in our city, one of the things that we tread on very careful territory is it's a multitude of reasons for that. And at the core of it, I'm going to say problem solving skills and understanding how to resolve conflict. That's really part of that core. How are we, not just as a school district, but as a society, modeling and teaching overtly conflict resolution? And it's one of those things that's very, it's a buzzword and people talk about it in schools and people talk about it in the community, but it is at its core one of the issues that we face, and it is the conflict resolution skills. And so what does that really mean in terms of education? In terms of education, that means logical thought process. It means being able to process information, being able to understand points of view that are different than your own. It goes back to what are those things about equity that create barriers that we can try and close those barriers and close those disagreements, understanding that differences aren't necessarily wrong, they're just different. But if we don't ever overtly talk about that, because at the core of some of the disagreement and violence, it comes from an area of not knowing, not understanding, and fearing that which is different. And so, and I know that's kind of a lofty answer, but at its core, that is where we are. As a council, working alongside the district and alongside the mayor's office and our police officers and fire departments and sheriff's offices, understanding what is it that we want to see that's different, modeling and being that we want to see that's different, and then being able to work with not just our young people, but work with our grown-ups to understand better ways of solving issues and resolving conflict. Yes, we can work on the future, but some of it we have to work on right now with the grown-ups, being able to work together and move forward, and understanding that our differences don't have to divide us. Our differences can actually be used to motivate and push us forward with higher levels of understanding.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Could I just add in, as somebody who's very involved with the Albany Fund for Education, I really appreciate the shout out, and also to any members, not that any of us have any extra funds, but we are immediately putting funds into computers, into getting them to kids. And it is really making a big difference. So That's just another option of things to do.
I think Councilmember Valorant has a question.
Yes, thank you. I've got two quick questions. My first one is for those grades, the middle schools and the high schools that are been online the entire semester, are we looking towards the spring semester after the holidays of possibly trying to create some type of a hybrid experience for them? Because as many of you know, there are students who can't wait for the summer to get out of classes, but then there's a lot of students who look forward to the fall because that's still safe haven. That's still a place where they can, grow and build their confidence, and that's still little piece of normalcy for many of our young people. So, to see all of our high schoolers and our middle schoolers that are in those vulnerable ages to not have that is very heart-wrenching. So my first question is, are we looking to try to shift into at least a hybrid for those students?
So to answer that question, I would have to say that it depends on what happens with any immediate funds being restored this year. That would be a huge component. We are looking, should we get funds to impact this year? We are absolutely looking at how do we strategically rebuild, because we can't just all of a sudden pour everything back in. And there are so many things that would impact that decision. So let's say that we receive the funds this year, but yet we still have social distancing. If that's the case, I don't have enough space in any of our buildings to bring all 9,000 students back. I don't even have space for that. So there are so many different components that we have to look at. Even if we get the funding, it depends on some of those conditions by which we are able to come back, that we would have to strategically look at rebuilding. And then I'll just say that number one, first and foremost, we would love to have all of our students in school in person. That is exactly what we want. And so measures that we would have to take to get to that, while they may be phased in along the way, understand that it is our goal to have all of our students in school in person each and every day.
It was better. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Better? Not so good? Okay.
Still muffled.
Type it in the chat. I don't know what's going on because
I think we lost her. Oh, there she.
You had a second question?
I had a second question, and this is piggybacking on the data that you shared with us. And I'm not sure if you've got the data, but I think it's good, and I think it'd be good data for this district to know. Of those students that are sharing devices, how many of those students are also the students who are not signing in and not participating? I'm not sure if you have that, but if you don't, I think that's good data to try to target.
So we do have that data and we monitor that data. That is how we know who's engaging and who's not. And that's where we deploy our homeschool coordinators to go and do home visits. We have our counselors, social workers, behavioral specialists, school psychologists reaching out to families directly. Some students we may not have been able to contact. So we are still trying to work on contacting them, because we're trying to contact relatives of relatives now to try and track our students down.
So you said, so just to, maybe I heard this, I didn't hear this correctly. You said there's 90 students that haven't signed.
There's about, it's 80 to 90 students that we have been tracking. And I don't have the most recent data on that. That was roughly mid first quarter that we were tracking.
So I guess then my question is, of those 90 students, how many of them are sharing devices?
Yeah, I don't have that data right now. I just know that those students are students that we have not seen log on. We've not had them check into classes. And so some of them have been issued computers, but they're just not connecting. And so that's where we have deployed the support team. That's what we call it, our support team, to reach out and contact those students. And again, that number is probably from about 4 weeks ago. And so when it's updated, we'll see where we stand.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Councilwoman Frederick's hand up with an additional question.
Yes, thank you for today's presentation. I think it really put a lot of items into perspective for us, and we can see the full impact of what's transpired. So my question is around extracurriculars. Obviously, extracurriculars play a key component into a child or a young adult's developmental phase in terms of physical fitness, mental health, and also identity and learning a new skill. So happy to see the strides being made in the fine arts and the musical arts field. And I'm just wondering, from a high level summary standpoint, what has the effects been on our sports?
So sports are a little bit different. We have, as you know, the governor has determined, we received that guidance to say which sports are permitted and which sports are not. And so we followed those guidelines. And so we did that in the fall. We had swimming, soccer, and cross-country track. Those are the ones that we were permitted. One of the things that we're doing as we move forward under the direction of our athletic director, Ashley Chappell, we are building in opportunities for students to come in and do conditioning, and that's for extracurricular. It is an intramural type model. So that, and we will be talking about this at a future board meeting because it is going to start happening in the spring. We've also done updates at our board meetings with our board about what we're doing in physical education and how our teachers, they have a whole website, which is absolutely outstanding, to show all that they're doing to do the virtual physical education classes. They've done virtual field days with our students. We have looked at that intramural component, and that would include middle level and high school. So it's not just one level. But again, there are certain guidelines that we have to follow. I mean, there has to be the social distancing. The students are wearing their masks. We're awaiting what sports are going to be permitted in the spring. And right now they're going to continue with swimming, bowling, skiing. I think that's all right now. Oh, and indoor track. They're working on what those guidelines need to be for indoor track. And so as the athletic directors work along with the council with regard to what those guidelines will be, when we receive those guidelines, then we will move forward with that. But aside from what is sanctioned, we are putting together I call it an intramurals type program for conditioning and training with our students. And it's not just for athletes, it's for all of our students to be able to participate.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I do want to highlight one of the pieces that Board President Savage did post. We do have our computer labs that are open. And so when you talk about trying to reach some of those students who may not be as successful, or they are successful and they're sharing a computer and they just need to be able to work independently, we are opening our computer labs. We have a morning session and an afternoon session. It is by appointment only. Because again, social distancing, where they can come in and work at the computer. So it's not just for people who are struggling, it's for any student that may need support. And sometimes that support is they're in a situation where they're sharing a computer and they need to be able to use a computer independently. And so our computer labs are being opened. We started that at the high school, roughly mid first reporting period. And we have started that at the middle level this past week. And there is an adult that's present to assist if needed. They can work independently. And we do have content area teachers that will float through and answer questions on an as needed basis. Any other questions?
Any other, oh, Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a positive feedback. One thing that was great with the online was the parent-teacher conference, where we had all the teachers appear, at the same time on the screen. And I thought it was great that it allowed each teacher to hear how the student was doing in different classes. So, I mean, there are bright spots. So I didn't mean to come on so strong. I mean, we're all struggling with this, but I just wanted to give you that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got one more small question. I saw the email about the students that had, the Albany High students that were high achievers. I think it was 900. How is that compared to previous years? Because I thought that was really good news.
It is comparable to what we've had in the past. We've seen an uptick, but it is still, that is comparable to what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I pulled last year's first quarter, and it was only 800. So it's 100 students more.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Does that mean you could actually hear me? Because that would be exciting.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, now we can find.
Excellent. I just wanted to throw in one sort of segue to one thing, which is to thank you all for the work that's being done in the planning department on the bicycle pedestrian master plan. The district we are submitting a letter with some comments, which I know is late because it was due yesterday, but we're working on it as fast as we can. But we wanted to appreciate the fact that that plan recognizes some of the safety issues around Albany High's campus, both on Washington and on North Main, and encourage anything we can do to address some of those safety concerns for our students. It is, as we all work together to try and create an equitable city, I cannot think of one place in the city that is as equitable as Albany High, right? Every student in Albany, with a very few exceptions who are enrolled in charters, uses Albany High, and the vast majority of them get there on their own 2 feet or using transit. So there are some parent drop-offs, which I know create some traffic excitement as well. And we will be working over the next couple of years as we move the project along to try and address those traffic issues. And we are looking forward to working cooperatively with the city as you hopefully are able to implement some of the ideas and strategies that are in the bicycle pedestrian draft master plan, which looks very promising. So thank you for that. I see that, Tom.
Okay.
So, any other questions for us? If not, just in closing, thank you so very much for this opportunity. We always enjoy coming to talk about the district and to answer your questions. And please feel free to reach out. Ron will follow up so that we can, with John, he will follow up so that we can make sure that we get that letter done and then that it meets all of your approval.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all
you
so
so
much.
much for coming.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and for our members, nothing further. We can adjourn the meeting. Anyone have anything further? Questions, comments? Tom?
Yeah, Kelly, I hope you don't mind. I want to bring up one of the things that we discovered was that the city of Albany has a law in the books that makes it illegal to bring in strike breakers. It's a minimum fine. It's around like $1,000. At some point, I'd like to make it stronger. But as you might know, Albany Med had a strike. They brought in strike breakers, and when it was a 24-hour strike, and when the nurses tried to come back to work the next day, they were locked out for 2 days. And I talked to Corey, Kelly, and JR, and I just want to let everybody know we're going to try to figure out the best way to deal with the situation. And I hope everybody's on board. And I'll be glad to talk to anybody one-on-one if you want more information. But just to let you know, I've gone to all the protests, and I know many of you have also. And I know the mayor was there, and the mayor said they deserve a contract. So I think this is something we can go in unified and try to help these people out. I mean, we got a terrible surge of COVID right now, and I know the vaccines are rolling out, but you know, we need our nurses, and you know, 2 years without a contract, it's just too long. Okay, and so I just wanted to get that out. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll support that, Tom.
Thank you. And so, JR, if you could, I forwarded you that link to the code where it was. If either you or Michelle can just forward, you know, short of throwing it in the meeting chat, because we're about to close out the meeting, just forward it to people so they can read it and see what's going on. And I'd also like to add that there's a county version of it too that passed a couple of years after that. We can look into.
Yeah, but
those.
Tom, Tom, didn't you want to look in at amending it as well? Because the fine is $1,000.
Yes.
That's not even close to being appropriate. When an employer spends $600 an hour on one employee, you're going to fine them $1,000. I think Mr. Hoey really should look at amending that, and we should look at upping that fine, which is more appropriate than $1,000.
Yeah,
$1,000 an employee. That's how it should be.
Right, it should
And
be
per
per,
day.
No, right.
per
Right now, it's
employee
not
and per day.
$1,000 per employee.
I'm on it, Corey. We
Right now,
talked
it's
about
just
it.
$1,000.
But one of the things
Okay, good.
we want to find out is it might be a criminal offense, so we might have to get the DA involved. So I definitely want to keep you in the loop on that. You know, do we want to wait till next year, or do we want to try to get it done this year? I mean, that's a question for you.
Well, I think it's the research and as much info as we can get as quickly as we can get it would be most helpful, because that would probably determine how fast we can.
Yeah, so is Tom asking, so are we asking the question, how do we enforce it? Because I mean, it's documented that they did use scab workers. This is documented. It's so are we trying to figure out how do we enforce it?
Yes.
Right.
JR feels it might be the DA's office that has to enforce it, or it could be our corporation counsel. If it's our corporation counsel, I'd like just do a resolution, you know, asking them to, the corporation counsel and the mayor, to enforce this law. But if it's the DA, you know, we can ask him to do it too. I'm sure he will.
Right, but the law does exist, and thank you, Tom, for bringing it to our attention. You hit me with this probably over a week ago, maybe a week and a half even ago. So thank you for that. And JR was looking into how we proceed.
I love that you're trying to make it criminal, Tom. That's awesome.
That's JR.
Whatever's gonna get it done. I mean, it says misdemeanor.
He's awesome. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, JR, do we want to talk after the meeting, or do you want to do it? Okay, sounds good.
We did, yeah, that was the intention, to talk after.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, but
Well,
this
it's
is
good to
good.
get everybody involved.
We got members involved, absolutely. And so they know what's going on. But with that, if
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Yeah, we all good with that? Okay, we'll adjourn. So JR, you can.
Have a good week, everybody.